Things have taken another major turn in the New York Islanders' search for the next general manager and president of the franchise. As every single day we discuss this topic, insiders reporting completely different names involved in the search. And frankly, that is a little concerning, although I will say for Islanders fans, the names we're going to talk about in this episode of Islanders Digest are really encouraging, and hopefully these are the names the Islanders are carefully looking at. We're going to break it down on this episode of Islanders Digest, but first, before we do that, I want to thank all of you for subscribing to the channel. We now have 190 subscribers, and we are now pushing for 500 subscribers, so if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, and you're an Islander fan, and you want more Islanders news, updates, rumors, all that stuff in this incredibly busy offseason for the New York Islanders, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Now let's get right into today's update on the search for the Islanders' next GM. As every single day there seems to be more and more twists, and now it seems, according to Chris Botta, that the Islanders are talking to Yarmo Kekalainen to be involved in the front office. We don't have confirmation that this is for a president role or a general manager role, and Yarmo Kekalainen would be pretty qualified for both since he served in both positions for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, we've talked about Kekäläinen before on this channel, and as I've kind of alluded, he's actually one of my favorite choices, if not my favorite choice, to be the GM of the New York Islanders. I'm between him and Mathieu Darche, and we do have a positive update on Darche too, by the way, we're going to talk about a little later in the video. First, I really want to discuss Kekäläinen and why I think he's such a great fit for the Islanders, because I know a lot of fans aren't really interested in Kekäläinen, and it makes sense. On the surface, the Columbus Blue Jackets were never really a good team when he was their general manager, except for one season. But there are so many things Kekäläinen did for the Columbus Blue Jackets, and one thing you really have to think about when it comes to this GM search is not only what their record was, like with their franchise and how good that team was, but how they did with their moves and whether or not their good moves could translate to the New York Islanders. And I've had a lot of questions when it comes to different GM candidates and what they would be able to bring to the franchise. And when it comes to Yarmo Kekalainen, I think there is a lot he could do for the Islanders. First of all, I think he's really learned from his mistakes with the Blue Jackets when you listen to his interviews talking about if he would get another opportunity, if he would do things differently. And that's definitely important when it comes to a retread in terms of GM that has already been a GM. Are you going to learn from your mistakes? Because if you were a GM and you are currently not working, you were fired for doing something wrong. Something didn't work. But with Yarmo Kekalainen, I think it's a really interesting case because you look at his time with the Blue Jackets, he had a great history when it comes to drafting. The Blue Jackets had several players who were drafted in the later rounds that played big roles on their team. Oliver Borkstrand was an example of a player picked in the third round that had great value. He also made really good picks early on. A great example of this is the Blue Jackets and Zach Werenski, 8 overall. That was a great pick, and a pick that some people were questioning at the time. I think everyone who questioned that is looking pretty stupid now. Zach Werenski is one of the best defensemen in the NHL, 20 goal scorer last season for a defenseman. That's absolutely incredible. And there are moves like that, also huge trades, like acquiring Artemi Panarin for Brandon Saad, and also huge moves and signings where he brought in Johnny Gaudreau, rest in peace Johnny Gaudreau, a huge signing to Columbus. Still, for most of his time with the Blue Jackets, they were not good. And a big reason for that is players simply would not want to stay in Columbus. But interestingly, even though that means the Columbus Blue Jackets were not great, I don't think this all falls on Kekäläinen, and it's definitely not a mistake he would have in New York. Columbus is not an easy team to get players to want to play for. And the fact that he was able to get a big player like Johnny Gaudreau actually speaks to the fact that he's a good general manager and likely would be competitive in bringing big fish to the New York Islanders. He has experience. Prospect development was really solid for the Blue Jackets. The issue was convincing those prospects to stay long term. And again, I don't think that would be an issue for the New York Islanders. As a result, I'm really excited if this is the direction the Islanders look to go. He has a much younger philosophy as opposed to people like Mark Bergevin and Ken Holland. And yet he does still have that experience being 58 years old. I think this would be a really good choice for either GM or president. But we're going to talk about him as a president in the sense because we now have confirmation from Arthur Staple that Mathieu Darche is getting an interview for the New York Islanders. And this is really exciting. I think this is everybody's top choice. And frankly, I think the dream scenario is actually one where the Islanders can get Kekäläinen and Darche because they both do different things really, really well. I think what Darche does really well is he finds really effective, underrated trades. So as you see constant examples of the Lightning really finding players and giving them bigger roles in the Lightning that allow them to succeed, and also really working the cap well. Yarmo Kekalainen, I don't think he managed the cap poorly. Frankly, the biggest issue with the Blue Jackets, and another issue that I wanted to bring up when it comes to why I don't want to judge Kekäläinen too harshly with the Blue Jackets, is the team had really low budget. I mean, he was never allowed to spend close to the salary cap, things like that. It's really tough to work with a team in a smaller market that does not want to spend. Wouldn't be an issue with the New York Islanders, even though the Islanders are not the biggest team. They are a bigger team, and the owners have shown they are committed to spending money on the hockey operation. So that's really encouraging. But you got to spend that money wisely, and I think that's something that Darche could really help with. And this makes a lot of sense. I mean, it seems like the Islanders do not want to give Darche both the role of president and GM. That would obviously be a risky decision, having somebody who's never been a GM. Although Darche has been a director of hockey operations, which is something I was not aware of. We're going to talk a little bit more about his qualifications at the end of this video. But bringing in this, and this is speculation. There is confirmation the Islanders are heavily considering Kekäläinen, when a few days ago it seemed like he was not really an option. So I'm really glad he's worked his way up back in the conversation. And we know for confirmation here from Stefan Rosner that they are interviewing Darche. Whether or not this is a situation where it's one or the other, or they can potentially bring in both, I'm speculating that you could bring in both. I think that makes sense, but you don't know. But just based on the fact that Kekäläinen has waited a few years to get back in a role with the NHL, and Darche is hungry for his first role as a general manager, I think Darche would be satisfied being just the GM and not the president, and I think Kekäläinen would be satisfied with being a president again in the NHL. So hopefully, and we don't know how they would work together if they fit. We just know what they did for their respective teams. But that is something, and again, we know they're both talking to the Islanders, but I'm just speculating. If they can get them both, this would be a dream scenario for Islander fans. You get somebody who's done it before as president, which is important because you do want to have some sort of stability. Obviously, I think Darche is very qualified, as we're going to talk about right now. But just having somebody who's been there before, and then with Darche, you get a winner. And that is also really important. So with Kekäläinen, there really was not a lot of success in Columbus. And granted, compared to the other GMs we talked about, I do think Kekäläinen actually has more valid excuses, as when it comes to somebody like Bergevin, I just think he made silly moves. And somebody like Ken Holland just was unable to understand the salary cap era. I feel like Kekäläinen deserves a second chance because he was not given the best opportunity by the owners of the Blue Jackets. Still, if they can bring in both him and someone like Darche, who has won the Stanley Cup twice with the Tampa Bay Lightning and also really worked his way up the organization, I also feel really encouraged. I was not aware before when talking about Darche that he was also director of hockey operations, so he's been more than just an assistant GM, and he's actually had a more hands-on approach in really structuring the organization, which is exactly what the New York Islanders are going to need. As we know, we need a complete overhaul. Scouting needs to improve. The AHL needs to be completely revamped. There are so many issues with the New York Islanders organization, and it's going to be a lot of work for a GM, as we've really talked about, but it also comes with a lot of opportunity. And I really do have hope that even though this was a messy process, and once again, the Islanders seem to be trending towards the wrong decision at first, similarly to when Lou Lamoriello really wanted to sign Brock Nelson, but he refused and really forced Lou's hands into trading him. Ken Holland being uninterested in this role and the Islanders being unable to talk to Jeff Gordon is really kind of forcing them in the right direction. And as an Islander fan, I am cautiously optimistic. Again, not going to get too excited until we have more word that these candidates are really likely, or actually not going to get too excited until these candidates actually, one or two of them or both, actually get the role. Because as we've been talking about, this search seems to change every day. I'm just waiting for the day there's like a tweet from Arthur Staple that says Chiarelli's getting a serious interview with the Islanders, which is going to be an absolute disaster. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but you never know with the search. But as it stands right now, Kekäläinen and Darche are both really good choices for this role. I think either one of them could do both positions really well. But if you can get both of them, I think that's a dream scenario for the New York Islanders. At least that's my thought. Let me know in the comments what you think. Would you like to see Kekalainen or Darche or both of them? Or would you like to see a completely different candidate? I'd love to know your thought in the comments below. As always, I love interacting with you guys in the comments. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, be sure to do so. My name is Patick Nilan. This is Islanders Digest. Let's go Islanders.